What a way to start an album review. Hello YouTube, what's going on? It's Ultim Hoshaki, my very first album review, and today we'll be looking at the fourth studio album by New Zealand hard rock band Like a Storm. Fucking cars. This is the latest album by New Zealand hard rock band Like a Storm. Now, if you don't know who Like a Storm is a band that was formed in Auckland, New Zealand by three siblings, Chris, Matt, and Kent Brooks, and their drummer Zach Wood from Los Angeles. Now, what makes Like a Storm so popular is that the fact that they use an Australian instrument called a didgeridoo in their music, which to me gives it that kind of uniqueness that a lot of rock kind of needs nowadays. OKURA is the latest album to come out from Like a Storm since 2018's album Catacombs. OKURA was released on January 14th, 2022.
But Hoshaki, what's a didgeridoo?
I would love to tell you, but that's for a future video because it's a long story and explanation. Back to the album review! Listening to this album when it first came out, for me being a diehard Like a Storm fan, I was really excited to hear this album because they've actually been teasing this album since October 31st, 2020. And after listening to it multiple times, I was not really intrigued at first, but then it kind of grew on me. That's what she said. Half of this album we've already heard if you are familiar with Like a Storm, with songs like Empire of Ashes, Liar, Death by a Thousand Cuts, Pull Me From the Edge, Teardrop, Fame, The Phoenix, so on. So I've already known these songs. But this is Like a Storm's most experimental album, if you will, with multiple didgeridoo interludes and a didgeridoo intro, kind of like the 2009 album, The End of the Beginning. OKURA was a huge excitement among all Like a Storm fans that had been waiting for this album since October 31st, 2020. Going into the very first track, which is OKURA, and that is basically the didgeridoo intro that you hear in the beginning of the album, and that very much is kind of eerie. It's really scary and really sets the mood for the next track that's going to come, Empire of Ashes, which is probably the heaviest song on this album, set by Death by a Thousand Cuts. Empire of Ashes really brings that aggressive and heaviness that we need in a Like a Storm album. Not talking about Pure Evil from Catacombs. But this is probably the highlight of the entire album, Empire of Ashes. This being a very heavy, screaming, and Matt's falsetto. Not going to lie, when my mom heard this song for the first time in January 15, 2021, she thought it was Amy Lee from Evanescence. I'm not even going to stunt. But even the falsettos and cleans sound amazing on this song. Going right into the next song, Liar. Now, Liar kind of threw me off. I was not expecting a sudden turn, because I've heard Liar before. I think it was in July or June of 2021 that Liar was released, and I was expecting something a lot heavier because Like a Storm keeps bringing out heavier and heavier music. I was expecting Liar to be a lot heavier. This is a lot more mellow. I'm not bashing the song in any way because I absolutely love the song, but I wish they could have brought something a little bit heavier because of the next song that comes with it, Death by a Thousand Cuts. Death by a Thousand Cuts is probably, next to Empire of Ashes, the heaviest song on this album. The combination of the Japanese koto, the pan flute, and the didgeridoo, plus nylon string guitars in the beginning, really brings out uniqueness that Like a Storm is known for doing. Going straight into the heaviness after that, in about a minute or so into the song, we are brought forth into this dark, heavy world of Japanese-inspired metal, and it is amazing. And then we go into Pull Me From the Edge, which Pull Me From the Edge is a very more emotional cut on this album. Pull Me From the Edge is one of the many emotional songs on this album, and it's probably my favorite emotional song on this album. There are no bad songs here, in my opinion. Kingdom, even though I said there are no bad songs, Kingdom I never really was able to get into. Kingdom is just one of those songs that you basically hear in a lot of rock. It's very generic. It's very cliche. It just sounds like an average rock song about not giving up your hopes. And, you know what? It's very cliche, like I keep saying. but I still dig it. I still love it. Teardrop. Teardrop was actually a cover of Massive Attack's song Teardrop, and it's actually not a bad cover. The didgeridoo plays in so well. Matt's very clean vocals, and I don't know if it's Matt or Chris that's screaming the words "teardrop on a fire," of a confession, "feel what's on my breath." I don't know who did that, but all in all, that's a really really badass cover. I love it. Then we go into Fame. This is the one that really threw me off because even though they were trying to sound mainstream, they sounded a little too mainstream. It almost sounded like Shinedown and 3 Days Grace came together and had a baby, and we this is Fame by Like a Storm. I don't know how else to explain it, but this is a very mainstream song, and it's probably one of the worst. Then we go into Tongariro, which is basically kind of like a didgeridoo drum solo interlude kind of thing, which sounds really nice. And you kind of hear, I don't know if it's Chris or Matt, doing the wake up that you hear, and it's wow. I can't believe it. The Phoenix. The Phoenix is a softer cut on this album, and I think The Phoenix was the very first song to be released for OKURA before we got Empire of Ashes, before we got Liar, before we got Fame. Um, this is probably one of my favorite soft songs on the entire album. Away from Pull Me From the Edge, it was probably one of my favorites. Kariotahi, it's a 40-second didgeridoo and slowly building interlude right into Scarlet Retribution. This song is fucking angst filled. This song is wow in many ways. Like right when Chris does the motherfucker part, I knew I was in for something and I knew it was gonna get heavy. For 5 minutes straight, we are hit with this punch in the face of Scarlet Retribution. And then to end the album, we have the song Low. Now, Low was a very emotional, very mellow, very depressing cut on the album, and is actually one of my favorites because I can relate. I have, Matt's line of "ever been so low, you've never felt higher," because that's what it feels like to be alive. That hits me in a lot of ways. I don't know why, but it does. And that's OKURA for you guys. If you want, you can check the album out. I'll have the link down in the description where you can look it up on Spotify. If you can listen to it on YouTube Music, that would be awesome too. I'll give you a link down with the playlist. And that is my honest review. Rating scale, I'm giving it a 9.5 out of 10. It is probably the best album to come out since Catacombs. And I'm not saying Catacombs is a bad album, but I'll probably review that in a later video. See you guys, and I hope you do well. Stay under drugs and alcohol. Stay safe, stay warm during this winter, and keep on rocking.